If you've been wanting to go to China, now is the perfect time if you want the authentic communist experience. But it might be a little hard to see the sights through the black bag over your head. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. It's a pretty dangerous time to be a foreigner in China. And I'm not saying that just because China's famous for its sinkholes, reused gutter oil, or unbreathable air. No, I'm saying that because China is swiftly becoming one giant lockbox with sinkholes, reused gutter oil, and unbreathable air. China has stepped up the use of exit bans of government critics, and it's detained tons of business people whose only crime seems to be working for a foreign company.
China's cracking down on companies with overseas investors. State media reports that global consulting firm CapVision was raided by authorities on Monday. It's the latest in an industry-wide clampdown on companies Beijing accuses of illegally trying to obtain sensitive data.
A U.S. firm caught in the middle of U.S.-China tensions. Due diligence firm Mintz fined $1.5 million. It's the latest in a nationwide crackdown on foreign businesses in the name of national security. It's the same company that had its Beijing office closed by authorities in March, with 5 staff detained by police.
Just in the past month, for example, we've seen Shanghai police raiding the offices of Bain & Company, a huge American consulting firm.
Beijing has blocked a senior U.S. executive from leaving the country. Michael Chan is a managing director at U.S. risk advisory firm Kroll.
Wow, who could have guessed a communist country wouldn't play nice with giant capitalist corporations? You know, besides this baby, even he knew this would happen, and he doesn't even know how to walk. And yet, China still wants you to think it's open for business. This is like a roller coaster catching on fire and crashing into the ground, and the theme park saying, "So, who wants to hop on next?" All this comes after the Chinese Communist Party changed China's anti-espionage law earlier this year. The changes are not foreigner-friendly. For example, one of the changes to the law makes it illegal to share state secrets, intelligence, or other data, materials, or items related to national security or national interests, which are carried out by or for foreign elements other than espionage organizations. Now, is what China considers national security or state secrets spelled out in the law? Of course not. Which is why businesses are concerned that everyday business activities, like gathering business info and sending it to overseas investors, could be considered illegal now. It doesn't help that China's spy agency, the Ministry of State Security, called on all members of society to combat espionage earlier this year. Now, companies that collect data like due diligence firms are definitely being targeted in China, but they're by far not the only ones. In March, China also detained a Japanese employee from the drug maker Astellas, supposedly for spying. In May, China sentenced a 78-year-old U.S. citizen to life in prison, also on spying charges. A senior employee at Japanese bank Nomura was barred last month from leaving mainland China. He was reportedly being held as part of an investigation into a former colleague of his. And just this month, China detained 1 current and 2 former employees of Group M, a unit of the UK-based advertising firm WPP. That was supposedly for accepting bribes. Gee, doesn't this just make you want to plan your next family vacation to Beijing? The city is so nice, you'll be imprisoned there for life. China has also been known to hold foreigners as hostages for political reasons. I'll give you some examples of that after the break. Welcome back. The Chinese government says it would never engage in hostage diplomacy. Reality says otherwise. The most high-profile example is the 2 Michaels, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. Michael Kovrig was a former Canadian diplomat who became an analyst for the International Crisis Group. Michael Spavor was a Canadian who lived in China but had a business doing cultural exchanges in North Korea. They were both arrested in 2018, just days after Canada took Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou into custody at the request of the United States, which wanted her for violating sanctions on Iran. And I'm sure that's just a huge coincidence. And not China going, let's see how you like it. China's not that petty, right? China accused Spavor of supplying photographs of military equipment to Kovrig and sentenced him to 11 years in jail. Kovrig was still awaiting sentencing when they were both released in 2021, 3 years after they were first arrested. Funnily enough, They were both released the exact same day that Meng Wanzhou was released by Canada. And I'm sure that's just a huge coincidence, and not China going, let's see how you like it. China's not that petty, right? Yeah, don't worry, China would never engage in hostage diplomacy. The only official explanation given for the release was that they had applied for and had been granted bail on unspecified medical grounds. Canada is not the only country that's had problems with China using foreigners as leverage in disputes, which is why the Australian government is warning its citizens to exercise a high degree of caution when traveling to China. And mind you, this is Australia telling people to be careful. You know, the country that's so insane that if you ask, hey, remember that time a guy punched a kangaroo to save his dog? People will say, which time? Seriously, Australia is like a giant floating Florida. That has nothing to do with China. I just wanted to get that off my chest. Australia says Chinese authorities have detained foreigners on the grounds of endangering national security. Australians may be at risk of arbitrary detention or harsh enforcement of local laws, including broadly defined national security laws. The most recent example of this was when China detained an Australian woman for 3 years, only releasing her earlier this month. Cheng Lei was a business reporter for Chinese state media CGTN when she was arrested in 2020 for, I kid you not, breaking a media embargo. A media embargo is when an organization, usually a government, gives information to the press but says they can't publish it until a certain time and date. Cheng Lei said she broke the embargo by a few minutes. This is like if your kids peeked at their Christmas presents a little early, so you said Santa wasn't going to visit them since they'd spend the next 3 years in jail.
Do you actually feel like you did something wrong? Well, the aim of RSDL and all the subsequent talks and writing self-assessments, I think, is to drive home that point that in China that is a big sin, yeah, that you have hurt the motherland and that state's authority has been eroded because of you. And I mean, what seems innocuous to us here is, and I mean, I'm sure it's not limited to embargoes, but many other things are not in China. Especially, I'm given to understand that the gambit of state security is widening.
She was charged with endangering national security, and if she waited a few minutes, it would have been fine. Is their national security like a souffle, where if you peek on it even a few seconds early, the whole thing will collapse? But as we reported a few weeks ago, her arrest and charges suspiciously coincided with a political spat between Australia and China. Former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison called for an investigation into the origins of COVID just a few months before she was arrested. China retaliated by waging an unofficial trade war on Australia. And of course, arrested Chung. Man, can't Xi Jinping just deal with his insecurities like a normal guy and get a loud car or something? It's not like it would make China's air quality that much worse. Chung said she could feel a change in the way she was treated in prison after Morrison left office and the Labour Party came into power. Current Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has focused on de-escalating tensions with China. And most importantly, he hasn't called for an investigation into the origins of COVID since he took office. Probably because we all already know where COVID came from. Aliens. Yep, that's it. Nothing else to see. Move along. After Cheng Lei's release, Australia's foreign minister said this was one of the benefits of engagement with China. China watchers have speculated that her release was intended to butter Australia up for a meeting between Xi Jinping and Anthony Albanese, which is now scheduled for early November. Australia isn't the only one warning its citizens about arrests like these, though. In 2020, the US and UK also warned travelers about the risk of arbitrary arrests in China and Hong Kong. And then this June, the US put out a new travel advisory, suggesting that Americans reconsider travel to mainland China due to the arbitrary enforcement of local laws, including in relation to exit bans and the risk of wrongful detentions. If you want to spend your vacation in jail, there are more fun ways to do it than going to China. For example, you can throw balloons filled with pudding at politicians. According to the human rights group Safeguard Defenders, China has 15 laws on its books that justify exit bans both for Chinese nationals and foreigners. China also isn't above using investigations into foreign businesses for political reasons. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. When it comes to political pressure against foreign businesses, China has all sorts of tools in its arsenal. Taiwanese company Foxconn, the company that makes iPhones and suicide nets for its employees, said it's facing a tax and land use probe in China. Two sources close to Foxconn told Reuters they believe it's politically motivated. The founder of Foxconn, Terry Guo, is currently running for president in Taiwan. He's seen as a more China-friendly candidate, or shall I say, more China money-friendly candidate than his rival and frontrunner Lai Ching-te. But despite being relatively pro-China, China seems to want him to drop out. That's because he's running as an independent, which could further split the pro-China vote, which is already divided between the Kuomintang candidate and the Taiwan People's Party candidate. His run as an independent is especially important as the pro-China candidates are now considering running on a joint ticket. Of course, China denies this targeting of Foxconn, saying the probe is just normal law enforcement. But at the same time, a spokesperson for China's Taiwan Relations Department said, while Taiwan businesses enjoy growth on the mainland, they should also assume corresponding social responsibilities and play a more active role in promoting peaceful development of cross-strait ties. Which is rich. China telling Taiwan it needs to promote peace is like a mugger telling the person they're sticking up, just give peace a chance, man. Apparently you can't just make money in China, you gotta have guanxi with the mainland as well. Now, Reuters sources said that there were tax audits done on several companies around the same time, but only Foxconn's audit was publicized in state media, a sign that China wanted to make Foxconn an example. Another reason China could be making an example of Foxconn is because it's looking to move away from China. It's been pushing to diversify its manufacturing base, and that could mean opening factories in India, one of China's arch enemies. One source told Reuters they viewed the audit as a warning to Foxconn about moving out of China. Seriously, Xi, funnel your insecurities into a loud car instead. As you can imagine, China's attitude towards foreigners has been a huge turnoff for foreign business in China. Michael Hart, the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in China, based in Beijing, told CNN that our business community is spooked. The Chinese government has continuously said it welcomes foreign investment. However, a flurry of recent actions taken against U.S. enterprises in China has sent the opposite message. The U.S. Commerce Secretary said that because of China's actions, American businesses are starting to go elsewhere.
They can't operate and think that there's going to be a raid on their business and they're not going to be told exactly what they did wrong. The recent moves by the Chinese government with their data localization or their counter-espionage amendments, it's just too much. And what businesses are telling me is the risk is too high and there are other places to do business in the world.
You know you messed up when all your benefits of engagement aren't enough to convince businesses to stick around. And all they care about are benefits of engagement. I ain't saying they're a gold digger, but they ain't messing around with no arbitrary arrests. She also warned that China was becoming uninvestable for the same reasons. According to the Associated Press, official data shows that foreign direct investment in China fell 89% from a year earlier in the 3 months ending in June. Wow, is Wall Street actually waking up to the fact that China isn't a safe investment? Nah, it must be a reaction to all the House committee investigations that are actually looking under the hood of investments in China. According to the Wall Street Journal, the corporate retreat from Hong Kong is accelerating, with the lowest number of U.S. businesses being recorded in the region since 2004. The American Chamber of Commerce in China, based in Shanghai, did a survey of 325 U.S. companies there. It said 1/3 of respondents reported that policies and regulations towards foreign companies had worsened in the past year. It also said that the percentage of companies optimistic about the 5-year business outlook fell to 52%, the lowest in the survey's history. That's right, China has literally destroyed their hopes and dreams. That's like what a Disney villain would do. The Foreign Correspondents Club of China says foreign journalists are also being exit banned. In its 2022 report, it says, Chinese authorities appear to be encouraging a spate of lawsuits or the threat of legal action against foreign journalists, typically filed by sources long after they have explicitly agreed to be interviewed. Journalists who have been targeted by these lawsuits have been barred from leaving the country while the lawsuits are ongoing. So if you're a businessman, journalist, or just a tourist who wants to vacation in China, I still recommend you go to China. Just make sure it's the Republic of China. Because even if you somehow wind up in jail there, at least there won't be as much sinkholes, reused gutter oil, and unbreathable air. And I can't make China Uncensored without support from viewers like you. All it takes is $1 an episode on patreon.com/China Uncensored. I call the fans who support the show the China Uncensored 50-cent army. And as a thank you to them, I answer their questions. And today's question comes from Ian Pendleton. How much influence does the CCP have in the state of California, at least as far as we're aware? Does the CCP have anything to do with how much of a disaster the state is right now? Or is that all the fault of the California government? That's an excellent question, Ian, and there is a lot there. Turns out China has been infiltrating California politics for a long time. There's really too much to talk about here, which is why I'm going to recommend you click on this video here all about it. China Uncensored can't continue without your support, so click on that orange button if you want to join the China Uncensored 50-cent army, like Ian. Thanks, Ian. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.